Hello everyone, welcome to another Flesh and Blood video. In this video, I decided to make a tier list, but not the type of tier list that you would normally think. This is a tier list showing what each hero kinda needs from Dusk Till Dawn. Since there are definitely some heroes that need a whole set, and there are some that literally need absolutely nothing, and they'll be perfectly fine. Most other creators are making tier lists of the meta after Oldhim is gone, or the meta for the current RTN season, but I think this is something that people can look and see. These are heroes that are at their weakest point. We need to be looking at what they're getting more closely because they are the characters that need the best cards, but also look at everyone in needs nothing and see them get literally the whole set somehow, like Lexi probably will, and still be the most dominant deck. So, with that said, let's get started. Before we start with putting these characters here, I just want to run through the tiers. Needs the whole set is going to be for the worst of the worst. Pretty much, these are the characters that they need like almost every card for their class to be really good or at least playable, or their position isn't really going to change. Needs something strong is going to be sort of like what Katsu got in Outsiders with Bonds of Ancestry. The reason Katsu is strong is really because of his additions he got in Outsiders. Needs one or two cards is heroes that don't need the most cards. They just need like two pretty decent ones. Someone like, I don't know, maybe a Dorinthia. I think Dorinthia is decently strong, but she's falling a little behind because she's missing a few decent cards, and we've already seen a card she's getting in Dusk Till Dawn. It already seems pretty good, but we'll talk about that when we talk about Dorinthia. And then needs nothing is just heroes that don't need a single card from this set. If they get anything, they're going to be more broken than they already are, and we really don't want that. So, now with those explained, let's talk about some of the heroes in more specific. Starting off, let's take a look at Dromai. Personally, I don't think Dromai really needs too much. I think Dromai's spot is more of her position in the meta because of other decks, not so much because of her cards. So I could see someone disagreeing with me on Dromai, but I do think that Dromai's dragons generally give her the edge over a lot of opponents. There are a lot of decks that can't really deal with these dragons, and you're seeing Dromai switch to a more aggressive plan, sort of playing attacks with their dragons, because something that the dragons are really weak against is being attacked by these decks that can play multiple attacks a turn. If there's any deck that really can't, or a deck that can't keep popping things over and over, it's going to be really hard for them to win. Something like Bravo or a Rhinar could just lose by a Dromai just playing two dragons and passing, not attacking. And then eventually when they have 4 or 5 dragons in play, it just gets so hard to deal with them, since at some point they'll find a Chromai to get an extra action point, or the one that makes something lose Phantasm, and then you can't pop the first one, and you get swung at with the second one, and then you're just starting to take damage, and eventually the threat will build up. Obviously there are decks that can deal with it. The ninjas are pretty good into Dromai since they can deal with the dragon super easily, but for a lot of the decks right now, I think Dromai is pretty good into them, and I really don't know what she could get to be stronger. I guess she would need a card to deal with, like, the ninjas that keep killing the dragons, or any deck that can keep killing the dragons every turn. But I think that would be a pretty bad idea, since the general idea of the game is that each hero has their strengths, but they have their weaknesses. Dromai is really good if a game goes late because she gets repeatable value from all of her dragons, but if she can get aggroed down really fast, she's not as strong since she doesn't have any time to set up her dragons. Next is Fi. I think Fi really only needs one or two cards. A lot of Fi's cards are really generic, just head jabs with the Draconic tag to use his ability, but that just makes him super strong. Fi's good because he's really consistent. You know what you're doing, and he's consistently good at pushing out damage. On any turn he gets something like an Art of War, he just puts out so much damage that him getting anything more than one or two playables makes him bonkers. He's one of the decks that's really good into control decks because he has super good, reliable, renewable resources. Fi was one of the decks that was really good into Oldhim, and now with Oldhim gone, he's going to be in a little bit worse of a spot. So I could see the reason to put him in to need something strong, but for the time being, I think Fi is still in a pretty good spot. He can sometimes race the fuseless Lexi list. If he hits, one or two good pump turns, he can put the Lexi in a bad spot. But if Lexi's end up going back to ice, he will need something, and only one or two decent cards that he could play probably will put him into that spot where he can probably come back and compete, at least in some part, with ice, since Fi was pretty much designed to lose to Frostbites, sort of the design of Uprising was Fi beats Dromai, Dromai beats Icelander, Icelander beats Fi. That was kind of the idea. We can definitely see that. Fi kind of breaks to Frostbites. Dromai isn't really good into repeated renewable attacks that Fi gets, and Dromai has so much defensive potential that it's super hard for Icelander to get to her. So I do think that Fi doesn't need a ton, but does definitely need a little bit to put himself up a little bit. Now let's look at the last Uprising hero, Icelander. She needs something pretty strong. Right now, Icelander isn't in the best spot. However, if she gets something on the level of the entire set, like most of the cards in the set, I think she could be too strong. I think Icelander just needs that one card to push her up a bit. That one, that extra, disruptive piece. Since the whole goal of Icelander is to be disruptive, the meta has sort of shaken to a point where it's hard to disrupt the aggro deck. Obviously, you can pretty easily disrupt Fi since he's on mostly reds, but it's hard to disrupt like the Lexi, since Lexi plays with a bunch of different resources. Sometimes she'll have a few floating, sometimes she has to spend everything, but she has a more flexible game plan that can adapt to it. So it's a little hard for Icelander to win that matchup, and that's kind of why Icelander's been pushed down, is because of the banning of hypothermia. That was sort of the main thing that made her start losing to Lexi. Yes, you have Channel Lake Frigid, but losing the hypothermia to put the Lexi in a bad spot really hurt, as well as now Lexi has something like Falcon Wing, so the hypothermia wouldn't hurt her too much since she does have something she can play with base Go again. It's just hard for Icelander to be in a meta relevant spot without something strong enough to push her to the point where she can compete again with the super strong aggressive decks. Next, let's take a look at some of the heroes we got in Outsiders, starting with Riptide. Riptide pretty much needs the whole set. Where the other two Rangers don't need too much to make them stronger. In fact, Lexi needs literally nothing, but we'll talk about that when we get to her. Riptide isn't doing anything. Even though Azalea and Lexi are probably two of the strongest, and Lexi maybe is the strongest hero currently in the game, somehow this character who plays pretty much the exact same cards doesn't really get anything. It's probably Lexi's usefulness of her New Horizons and her bow Voltaire Strikes Twice that give her so much power, but Riptide really doesn't get any of it. His ability seems pretty unique, giving you extra damage when you trigger your traps, and the ability to load an arrow by playing a card from your hand, but why would you want to load an arrow when playing a card from your hand when the bow he gets to play Death Dealer is so strong, replacing the card you pitched by drawing one? Or why is his ability to deal damage with his traps feel so weak? Because his traps are more tech cards than actual strong interactive pieces. When you think of the original traps, they happen no matter what. Yes, they made your opponent pay resources, but that was sort of their trade-off. And you had to play them from Arsenal. But compared to the newer traps, they're more restrictive in the sense that they don't always trigger. If something doesn't have Go Again, Frailty Trap doesn't really do anything. If they didn't pump their attack, Buzzsaw Trap is just a blue block 3. They don't do anything if their effect doesn't happen. And where, yes, Riptide will probably be able to get 2 or 3 damage out of this ability, which is understandable why Riptide has less HP than the other Rangers, since he's getting this free damage from his hero ability. It doesn't really make sense how Riptide isn't stronger. So he definitely needs some tool that pushes him over the edge, but he probably needs a few, not just one. So Riptide is definitely one of the characters that is gonna need the whole set to make him actually playable. And if we had Plunder Run, he'd probably be playable, but I don't think we're going to get that card back. Next is Azuri. I think Azuri is a hero that probably doesn't need anything, but is probably going to get something. To the nature of her ability, she's really flexible. She gets to play whatever generic she wants, pretty much. The next CNC type card, if it's strong enough, she'll play it. She doesn't need any stealth cards. She doesn't need any attack reactions, because I think she has good enough of them with Shred alongside whatever else she may be playing. But even though I don't think she needs anything, she's probably going to be the one hero that randomly gets something. Even though she's in a fine spot, she's a pretty good aggro deck. She has some nice disruption. She is probably what Icelander wishes she was, honestly. Even though she's not a control deck like Icelander, she has a lot of this tempo disruption that Icelander really wants. Azuri does more damage than Icelander, and even though she doesn't have the Frostbites, her disruption is a lot stronger, banishing the opponent's arsenal with some of her contract attacks, banishing a card from your opponent's hand. Even just, again, looking at contract, annihilate the armed, just banishing the top card of their deck, or any of the other contracts, banishing the top card. And that's just looking at the contracts. We can have CNC. We can have something like a Humble if we need to get rid of our opponent's effect in a race phase if talents become a problem. Really, any tech CNC statline card we want, Azuri is really good with since she can just put it into play for free. So I'm sure she'll end up getting some generic strong attack that'll be good for her, but nothing in the set needs to be designed specifically around her. Finally, even though she really isn't an outsider's hero, we have Azalea. And I think Azalea is really strong, but I do think she could use one or two more cards. Azalea is in a spot to where she benefits from all the new cards really well, because they all fit her playstyle. She wants to pump up one really big arrow, give it Dominate, which was even made easier because of the card Spire Sniping. And the new laces give her a ton of potential. She gets a really nice quiver, which helps her with some of her aim counter cards, her Deadeye, even like Blood Rot Arrow. You can put an aim counter on that to give it +1. So she has a lot of added utility that she really needed, because prior to this set she did nothing. Now she gets Codex of Frailty, and she gets all the laces and the Blood Rot Arrow and the Spire Sniping. She gets so many tools now that she's actually a playable deck. But when you compare her to Lexi, you start to see that maybe her tools aren't as good as you might think. Where Lexi is good into almost anything because of how versatile she is, your Red in the Ledgers don't do anything against a Bravo. Or they don't do anything against a Reiner. Or any deck like an Arachne. Or an Azuri. Or an Icelander, even. Anything that wants to play only one card a turn, your deck does nothing. At all. Yeah, you chip them down, but the deck that wants to play one card a turn is going to beat you in the one card a turn race. So forcing them to only play one card isn't super strong. Although obviously there are times where, that is good. Azalea is really good into Ninja because they want to play a ton of cards. Good into the Mirror, I guess, because you can't load the bow. Not super good into Lexi because you can load the bow multiple times, but theoretically strong because you stop them from firing more than one arrow. So Azalea doesn't have the strongest matchups, and when compared to Lexi, doesn't have everything there, so I do think she does deserve only one or two new cards that could put her closer to how strong Lexi is. Now that we looked at the most recent heroes, let's look at the problem heroes. Lexi needs absolutely nothing. If this hero gets even one card, it's gonna be a problem. This is currently the strongest hero in the game. I don't really need to explain myself. However, this hero, for some reason, gets to use everything better than whatever character it's designed for. Oh, your nice generic ice cards that Icelander gets? Lexi gets to use them super easily. Your super strong, go tall pumps that are designed for Azalea and Riptide? Lexi takes those, puts them on her arrows, and gets double the potency because she's throwing so many. Not that the pumps pump the other arrows, because they don't, but when you get to throw a second arrow after, that does the same damage because she's playing the same arrows that the other ones do, and they don't get to throw another arrow. It's kind of crazy. Lexi just gets everything simply because of Voltaire. And, like, she's the only ranger that really gets to play 3 of a kind. She gets the most potency out of her Rain Razors. She uses every card the best out of Ranger, out of Ice. Obviously, she's the only Elemental Ranger, so she's the only one that gets to play Voltaire, gets to play these Ice arrows that she might end up switching to if the meta goes back to more aggro. So Lexi does not need a single thing. Similarly, Briar does not need a single thing. This is a closer argument to, I would say, Fi, to where when Briar doesn't draw her pump, her Channel Mount Heroic, she's about on the same level as Fi. She does good damage, but it's not enough to compete with, the Lexi, the Azuri. However, the difference comes in when she does draw Channel Mount Heroic, and she becomes the strongest deck in the format. Dare I say stronger than Lexi. If Lexi could play Earth, I'm sure she would play Channel Mount Heroic, but Briar just gets super strong with it. Also, I don't think they're going to make a card designed around Briar when she is going to be banned soon because she's very close to being Living Legend, like Old Him. And then we'll have almost that whole set gone. And hopefully by the time Dusk Till Dawn is over, Lexi will be gone too. And we can just wipe our hands clean with Tales of Aria. Because every hero that has had more than one element is absolutely insane. And Icelander isn't super strong right now. She has one element. When she first came out, she was really strong. So I could say every elemental hero is strong, but obviously Icelander right now needs something. But all of the multi-element heroes are either Living Legend currently, or are almost Living Legend, or are the strongest deck in the game. So can't really argue with that one, of how both these characters don't really need anything. Next, let's take a look at the Monarch and one Dynasty hero that I didn't talk about yet, which I guess we'll start with him, Arachne. Arachne kind of needs a whole set too. Compared to Azuri, Arachne doesn't do anything. In fact, Azuri's starting to play his contract cards. So, there's like no point to play this character. His Fate Seal ability isn't really strong. So, it doesn't do anything. I mean, I guess there is a point to putting a card on the bottom. But if you wanted to play Arachne, I could just tell you, play Azuri, and the deck would work twice as good. He needs something, and it's a lot of it. He needs a lot of something. And since Azuri doesn't really need anything, I think the design space to give Arachne something that helps him with his more control-y game plan could be inside of Dusk Till Dawn. Now looking at the Monarch heroes, let's look at someone else who needs the whole set. Levia. This character's terrible. You want to know why this character's terrible? Because every other hero has an upside for their ability. Levia is the only hero in the game whose hero ability is to alleviate a downside, which makes her terrible. You'd think her cards would be stronger than most of the other cards. They're not. I would argue most of the cards that Reiner gets to play, that are the random discard effects, are so much stronger than the random banishment effects that Levia gets. She got, I don't even remember what that card's called. Is it Gore Belching? Is that the card from Outsiders? I don't think that card's played. So, I don't know. She needs everything. And this set is based around Monarch. Like, we're getting a new Prism. We're getting a new Shadow Runeblade to replace Jane. She has to get something. At least something Shadow. I don't know if we'll get a Shadow Brute card, but something in Shadow at least that makes her playable. Now, Bolton is a little bit of a different story. I think Bolton is actually playable. Obviously, he needs something since he really isn't good, but he's more playable than the other ones. He has a strong combo finish that, if you get there, wins you games. So he has a defined sort of alternate win con of building up a soul. He has some really strong attacks. He has really good defense since he's in light. He gets something like Soul Shield. His attacks do give something more desirable. They are higher costed for what feels like no reason, since they don't have Go Again, and to get their effects you have to spend another card from your hand. But I suppose the payoff is there for his charge attacks. The main payoffs, though, are things like Cataclysm, Luminarch Ascension. The attack reaction, I don't quite remember what it's called, but you can spend as much soul to give something that much power. And V for the Vanguard helps you set those up. So Bolton is in a good enough spot, I think, to where he is a playable deck, but he's not going to take down any big events currently. He'll definitely need something. And like I said with Levia, we're going back to the theme of Monarch with Light and Dark with this supplemental set. So I'm sure Bolton will get something a little nice in this set. That'll definitely make him more playable. The last heroes we have left are the first 8, except Azalea, because I roped her in with Outsiders. So I guess we'll start with the Arcane Rising heroes. Dash doesn't need anything, but she kind of does. So Dash is fine. She's in a good spot. I guess you could say it's not really her meta with Azalea and Lexi running around, but she's a playable deck. Close to how I'd say the ninjas are a playable deck. They're a good deck. They're not terrible. They're not like, I'd say Bolton's playable, but he's not a good deck. Dash is a good playable deck. The problem is, sort of like with Dromai, to where their deck is just meta dependent. If Ranger wasn't as strong, Dash would be super strong. Dromai's strong because the rest of the format. Same thing with Dash. Now, the reason Dash is in 1 or 2 cards, though, is because the meta we're going into, where it seems like Ranger is going to be played more than it is now, Dash is going to be in an even worse spot and probably needs something. I think the main issue with Dash, though, is her class. There isn't a Mechanologist replacement, since she's the only one. So they have to balance Dash more fairly. I think one of the issues that happened with Runeblade is happening with Ranger right now, was there were 3 Runeblades in the pool. So they designed these Runeblade cards stronger than they probably should have been. And even though they were designed for one specific hero, as an example, I would say Shrill, even though that's a card that's seemingly designed for all three of them, is probably the strongest in like chain. But since it's a card that's designed for every rune blade, something like Swarming as well, I'd say Swarming is stronger in Viserai, but suddenly it's just a generic Runeblade card that's super pushed because there are three of them. Sort of like Ranger. Ranger got, the hybrid cards are a little weird because they're playable in multiple classes, so they're obviously going to be more pushed. But like Codex of Frailty, if we take Assassin, well, we actually have to take Assassin into that situation. That is a card designed around 5 different heroes playing it. So it has to be strong enough for the worst of them, the worst of those heroes, which I guess the time would be Arachne, since we didn't have Riptide out, would have to make that card playable, but Arachne sucked. So that card had to be stronger than it probably should have been to make Arachne good, and it just super pushed Lexi and Azalea and Azuri. And yes, the codexes, all of them do close to the same thing, but did all of them really need to give you a ponder token? That's kind of the thing I mean, right? Like, all of them give you a ponder token. They didn't need to. I'm getting off topic, but I think you can get the idea. Dash is strong because all of her cards are designed for Dash, but Dash has been getting less strong cards because there hasn't been enough mechanologists for them to design these cards that are designed for multiple characters of the same class. Like Ranger or Runeblade had, where their generic cards for that class are just a lot stronger than just the Met cards. Because all the Met cards are just designed around Dash, where all the Runeblade cards are designed around how do all three of these, well, most of them I'm sure too, because Chain went by so fast, but how these Runeblades or these Rangers are all going to play with them, and not how are just this one character that we can easily design around are going to be playing them. So, sorry if that part got a little bit ranty, but I think Dash needs a little sun. Next, we'll talk about Viserai. I think he also needs 1 or 2 cards. Compared to Briar, he's not as strong, but compared to everyone else, he is pretty strong. I think Viserai could get 1 or 2 tools, although I don't want to see another Everfest. Please, not that. Anything but another Everfest. Just 1 or 2, not Shrill and Swarming and... Well, those 2 are 1 or 2, but like Revel. Like, there are so many things in Everfest that kind of just broke Runeblade. I don't want to see that again. Maybe something closer to, like, obviously not an Arclight Shard, but maybe something more designed around a Rune Chant. Obviously, the new Runeblade is going to use Rune Chants because of the new mechanic on some of their cards, but I think that's fine. Obviously, we don't know what the hero ability does, but it's something that not every Runeblade can use, because Briar doesn't make Rune Chants, and Chain, we don't have to think about him anymore. So, something closer to the hero design I think would be cool, instead of just something more based on Runeblade in general, because if Briar isn't Living Legend by the time the next ban restricted announcement, that would mean that if this card is designed poorly, it will make Briar even stronger, and she'd be sitting there at like 1500 randomly because she wins a big event before the next ban restricted announcement, and it just forced the meta all on Briar, which is something we obviously don't want. Like how everyone's probably going to play Lexi if, she gets any playable card in Dusk Till Dawn. The final Arcane Rising hero. Sorry I got a little ranty about the Arcane Rising heroes. I'll try to finish this one up pretty fast. I don't really have much to say about everyone else here. Kano probably only needs one or two. If you give Kano too much, he's too strong. He's kind of like a Dash, but more volatile. Bad cards won't see play. Obviously, bad cards won't see play in Dash, but some cards in Dash, even though they aren't super strong, are still playable because Dash is looking for these key specific things. Kano doesn't need key specific things. You give him a playable blue card, he's going to play it. Kano only has counting playing multiple copies of a card, 50 something cards. He always has these random spots that he has to fill with not super strong spells. But the second he gets a strong spell, it's an easy include. And if you give him anything as strong as Aether Wildfire, he just gets stupid. So he doesn't need everything. But again, he could use a little something. Not something super strong, but maybe an extra little poke tool. Maybe something that's a little defensive. So if you decide to start going for your combo, but then you hit that, you can just decide to wait for next turn because now you can defend yourself. It's probably something like that. Something that makes Kano a little tankier, I think, would be nice. But nothing that would make him way too tanky for what he wants to be doing. Maybe something that could block from the banish zone if it was banished this turn, I think would be okay. Something around those lines, maybe. Finally, let's take a look at the Welcome to Wraith heroes, starting with Rhinar. I think he doesn't really need too much. If we look at the most recent calling, Rhinar did get a top 8, so that does show that he is pretty strong. Similarly, I'm going to put Bravo in the same tier. Bravo and Rhinar are pretty similar to where both of them have these defined decks that do certain things. They're just looking for random stronger pieces. Rhinar got Skullcrack. He got Swing Big, just these general good attacks that he's playing now because that's something he needed. Bravo got Macho Grande. He got something like a Terra Sunder, just these strong, good blues that he wants because they're more playable than his other blues. Terra Sunder is a little stronger than what I'm saying there, but a Macho Grande, it's just a good blue. It's just playable, so he's playing it. Better than whatever he was playing before, some random blue that he's never going to play. At least he's playing a blue that he'll sometimes play. So those two they don't need too much, they just need something a little nice. And then finally, Dorinthia and Katsu. Starting with Dorinthia, I think she's in that same boat of needs only one or two cards. This is definitely going to be the longest tier. Actually, I think both of them are up here, just to cut it a bit short. Dorinthia, we know, is getting a new specialization that I think looks super cool. Obviously, we don't know what courage tokens do, but I have my assumptions. And I think since she's getting that, she can get one more decent air react or non-attack action. She'll be in a fine spot. Since one of the problems that I thought she'd have next set is if the new Prism's too good, how is she gonna deal with all the ward stuff? That attack react deals with the ward stuff. And then Katsu, he got a lot in Outsiders. I'm not gonna lie, but I mean, for a aggro hero that just got a ton of support, he's really not doing too much. Yes, he is stronger. Bonds of Ancestry, Descendant Gustwave, Dishonor makes him super strong. Lets him actually win because it lets him tutor up these strong attacks, play more attacks each turn. It's kind of the idea, what they wanted to push with Katsu, but I do understand, Riptide needs more support, and he's an aggro deck. That's fine. I don't expect... Well, I don't know what that was. I guess my... That's a little weird. Okay. Whatever. Sorry about that. But I do think Katsu does need a tiny bit. Put him on the level with Alexi or Nizuri. But not too much. So, before we close out the video, I'm just going to go through each of these tiers. Who needs a ton from the set, and the tier needs the whole set, is Riptide, Arachne, and Levia. The people in needs something strong is Icelander and Bolton. The people in 1 or 2 cards is Phi, Azalea, Dash, Viserai, Kano, Reinar, Bravo, Dorinthia, and Katsu. And the characters in needs nothing are Dromai, Azuri, Lexi, and Briar. That's going to be it for this video. I hope you all enjoyed. Next week, I think we're going to go back and look at another deck list. Not sure what I want to do just yet, but we'll have to see what I think about next week. I'll see you all in the next video, and I hope you had a good day. Goodbye.